In this demonstration, we're going to go over the data approval application. But this will be a little bit different as we will talk about some additional requirements when performing this as a live demo. We will go over checking data prior to entering the approval application just to make sure everything is set up correctly. We will run the analytics to make sure that the approval app displays data correctly. We will then go over submitting data, and we will do this in two phases. First from partner to agency, and then from agency to interagency. The data approval app interface will also be reviewed just to see what it looks like, how we interact with the app, and what are the appropriate options that we can select within the data approval application. We will also review data in the app itself, and we will discuss how that gets translated from data entry to the data approval using the analytics. We will also discuss locked data entry and what happens at each step of the approval process and when that data is locked or can be sent back for the user to edit the data. In this demonstration, we're going to go over the data approval application. We will discuss how to set up the data approval demonstration if you happen to be doing it in a live environment. Doing this particular demonstration is a little bit different when compared to the other applications, as there's some additional setup involved in getting this to work smoothly. For starters, I'm going to log in with an IP account and make sure that there's some data available in the system. When doing this demo, it's a good idea just to demonstrate submission from IP to agency and stop at that point, rather than go through the entire chain of approval. So to check if there's some data, I'm just going to go to data entry. I'm going to find a site that I've entered some data, and I'm just going to double check to make sure that that data is present. So we see that I have some data available in the system. If there is no data present, then make sure that you enter some data at this point. If you've gone through the data entry exercise, then data should already be there for you to use. The next step in setting up this demonstration is to ensure that the analytics tables have been run. If you did the data entry exercise more than 15 or 20 minutes ago, then it should be no problem and you shouldn't have to worry about running this analytics process initially. However, if you've just entered data and you want to now run the data approval demo, you have to make sure that you run the analytics process in between these steps. What the analytics process does is grab all the data values that have been entered in the system and send them to the various applications that are available within Datum. This includes grabbing data from the data entry and sending it to the approval app for you to review. Not every account in Datum has the ability to run the analytics process. So you have to make sure that before you're doing this demonstration, you request the proper permission to run the analytics process. So I'm going to switch to another account with another user that has access to the analytics process. I run it from going to my apps, finding the reports app. We will see on the left side there's an option Analytics and Data Mart. The analytics tables update will be automatically checked. It is the only option we need to leave selected. And then we simply start the export. Now this process takes about 3 minutes, so I'm just going to let it run for the next 3 minutes and then come back and restart the video when this process has been completed and continue. When the analytics process is complete, we will get a notification saying that the analytics tables have been updated. It'll have a green check mark beside it. Now that the analytics process is complete, we can go ahead and get into the approval application. I'm going to switch back to my IP user that I was in initially, and I'm going to navigate to the approval application. This will just take a little bit of time to load, and when you're doing this demo, make sure to allow the application to load completely before proceeding to any next steps. So now that the application is loaded, we see a couple different options available. First, we see the data stream and the period. We see tabs for submit and view, and then we see the mechanism. I'm going to select the appropriate dataset group along with the appropriate period. I can either submit or view. The View tab has all of my mechanisms, regardless of their submission status. The Submit tab will only have mechanisms that I have not yet submitted for approval. If I want to submit, I simply select a mechanism. If I want to select all mechanisms, then I would select the appropriate checkbox, In this case, we only have one mechanism, as this is in the training environment, but of course in the production environment, you may have more than one mechanism which you need to submit for approval. After I've selected the mechanism or mechanisms of interest, I click on Proceed. I can now select my appropriate data set, and I can review the data. If I do not run the analytics process, or have not waited long enough between entering data and getting into the data approval application to allow the analytics process to run automatically, then I will not see this information displayed in the approval app. That is why it's so important to run the analytics process between each step when running this demo. Now that I see that the data is present and I'm happy with the data that's been entered, I can go ahead and submit this data to the agency level. All I would do is click on Submit the Mechanisms. It will process the request, and it will give us a notification that the submit is successful for one mechanism. We can now recall the submission if we would like, or we can view the submission if we would like. One thing to note, after I've submitted this to the agency level, I can no longer enter data. So let's go and check what that looks like in the data entry application. When I navigate back to the dataset with the appropriate parameters, it will give me a notification saying the dataset is locked. This means I can't enter data anymore because it's been submitted for approval at the agency level. I can either recall the submission if I want to edit the data, or if this data has been accepted at the agency level, I have to have the agency push it back down to me so I can edit the data. So we're going to log out of this account, and we're going to log back in as an agency user and see what the approval looks like from their perspective. Before I log back in as an agency user, I have to run the analytics process once again. Now in this case, we've already submitted from IP to agency, and we would quickly like to log into the agency and show people how that worked. So in all likelihood, you will have to run the analytics process between these two steps. So I'm going to switch back into that account which has the rights to run the analytics process, and I'm going to go ahead and start the export once again. It's going to go ahead and update the tables, and we'll come back when this is finished in about 3 minutes time. So the analytics tables have now been updated. We can see by the prompt as well as the green check mark that's now present. So we can go ahead and switch back to the agency user and see what that looks like in the approval application. So let's log in as the agency user. We can then access the data approval application. Once again, we just let it load. And let the application load fully before proceeding with the demonstration. We now select the appropriate dataset group, time period, and now we see that the mechanism that we submitted earlier is available. Here we can accept the data. We choose the mechanism, click on Proceed, select our data set, and now we can see the data once again. Now, same as before, if I didn't run that analytics process, I would not be able to see this information. So make sure that the analytics process is run between switching accounts from IP to agency. Now you see here we can either return the submission or we can accept. If we return the submission, then the IP user will be able to enter data once again. If we accept the mechanism, you'll get a prompt that says the acceptance has been successful. Now we can either submit the mechanism upwards to the interagency level, or we can return the submission back down to the IP level. In order to submit, we would select the mechanism, click on Proceed. Once again, we choose the data set, view the data, and then we can go ahead and submit the mechanism. When we submit the mechanism, it'll give us a prompt that says the submission has been successful for one mechanism. Now you can see up until the point at which the interagency level accepts that submission, we can still recall it as the agency user. Once they accept that, it is then locked, and we can no longer recall it. So, whenever data edits want to be made by the implementing partner, we need to make sure that the data is sent back down to them. Otherwise, the dataset will be locked and no further changes will be able to be made. When we want to submit data, we need to make sure that we accept it first at an agency level and then submit it further upwards the approval. So these are the basics of data approval. When we're running the demonstration, we must make sure that there's data entered. Between each step, we need to make sure that the analytics are run. This means between data entry and entering the approval application as an IP user, submitting data from IP to agency, and for the demo, that's really the only 2 times you should be running the analytics. Past the agency, it's the same steps, and you just reinforce these concepts. If users are doing a hands-on exercise, then you should think about having the user stop at a certain point for IPs, running the analytics all at the same time, and then having them log in as an agency in order to make sure that it works correctly. So let's just review some of the concepts that we introduced in this video. We emphasize that when running a data approval demonstration, you need to make sure that there is some data in the system. If there is no data in the system, then make sure that you enter some demo data in order to run the approval demonstration. The next step is to check if analytics has been run. If enough time has passed, then analytics would have run automatically. You can double check by checking the data approval app and seeing if your data appears when you review the mechanism. If it doesn't appear, then make sure to run the analytics manually before doing the demonstration. After you've run the analytics, you can log in as the IP user and demonstrate what the approval app looks like. You can then submit the mechanism to the agency. Make sure that you run the analytics process in between logging out from the IP user and logging in as the agency user. If you do not do this, then in all likelihood, you will not see the data when you log in as an agency user. When you log in as an agency user, you would then review the approval app once again, accept the mechanism. You can demonstrate recalling or sending that back the submission if you would like, and you can also submit the mechanism to the interagency level. At that point, it's a good idea to stop the demo and have them try the hands-on exercise. So those are most of the concepts for the data approval demonstration. Just make sure to review anything that you're not sure of, and if you have any additional questions on how to perform this particular demonstration, make sure to reach out to someone in the Datum deployment team.